Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. It is Thursday, August 3rd, 2023. Time for another indictment, probably. I don't know. Does the grand jury meet today? It's a good question. I don't know whether they have finished their work and have been dismissed or whether they are meeting today. And I guess if they are meeting today, it's probably not for an end of the school year party or anything like that. I don't know. I'm not certain what's going on in that. I just thought of that as I was heading to the year. We could check in on that, or maybe Greg knows already what's happening, but that would be interesting to find out and something to track and something probably that should have been reported by the people who are paid to report such things. Let's see, and made itself, they should have made that news available to me. Really, honestly, it's a huge failure that it didn't deliver this directly to my plate. Anyway, as it happens, he's still under indictment. We can call it another indictment today. We might even continue reading that indictment today, although once again, there are any number of, all you need to really read is this pieces, one of which is right here. Here it is. I happen to have the page open, front page of Daily Kos is what I'm talking about, and let's see, there's Laura Clausen is all over a bunch of things, got a lot of angles on this one, including the must-read passages in the latest Trump indictment. We could probably save some time by reading that, but also she has rounded up, I guess, the reactions of Republican competitors for competitors. They're in the race, anyway, whether they're competitive or not, in the race for the nomination for the presidency in 2024 from the Republican Party. That's another question. And as you might have expected, it looks from the headline like the results are disappointing. But you were never going to be surprised, happy, encouraged, what have you, by the Republican field, with the exception of those who have entered the race with the specific purpose of, 1, taking shots at Trump, and 2, torpedoing their own chances with the Republican Party. But, we're glad they're spending their time that way. And also, I see good reminder from Hunter, who says, don't forget, essentially, Ted Cruz, Josh Hawley, Ron Johnson. Remember the names of Trump's other co-conspirators. I would put a flag, particularly in Ron Johnson, maybe straight through him, if it was possible to arrange. But that's a guy who I think has a lot of trouble ahead in terms of the number of people who will point at him, point to his staffers, etc., because he was one of the crucial links in one of the physical acts of the conspiracy that's named in this indictment. I think time's running out maybe for Ron Johnson. I don't know whether he'll ever really actually be criminally charged. Probably not. In most of what he did, I guess he could get away with maybe speech and debate clause defenses, even though the First Amendment defenses aren't available to, or shouldn't be available to Trump in this indictment and to many of the other people who are unindicted co-conspirators. But, and I think probably a lot of them will escape criminal prosecution, probably because most of what they did took place on the House or Senate floor, depending on where they were, whether they were in joint session or over on the Senate side. Plus, of course, same things for a lot of the House members. But Ron Johnson did have a hand in letting his staff get a little too intimately involved in the scheme to actually sneak the fake electors' paperwork onto the floor for Mike Pence to be able to read. That's still one of the more astonishing parts of the whole story, not just the indictment, but I'm still gobsmacked the whole thing. Well, you remember when we were running through this actually prior to the election and saying, I guess prior to the election, we probably weren't talking about fake electors. I don't think we got that far. We were just talking about other schemes that they would use to fake the results of the election. But I guess once we got around to the idea of fake electors. I know we were tipped off to that prior to January 6th, and my big question mark in all of this was the mechanics, the physical mechanics of the things. How are you going to get these things to the floor? And it's unlikely that you'd be able to fool Mike Pence into believing that they were the real certificates when everyone had seen the news, for instance, about Arizona, which would come up very early in the roll call. But I guess if you convinced him that he should read those, that would be another thing. But it was really a question mark as to how do you get those things to the floor? And the answer appeared to be Ron Johnson and his staff, why they were chosen to be the ones to pass it on. And I guess I think still that they may have been asked to pass on more than just Wisconsin's alternative slate. But at least that would have made some sense. And if it is limited to Wisconsin, it's sensible nonsense, I guess. Why would he be chosen to have executed this nonsense? Anyway, I think more to come on him. And in the meantime, more to come from Greg Dworkin, because he's here and he's prepared a whole, raft of stories and everything, and has been reading about things because it was a coup to try to overthrow an election and take over the United States government. And that's interesting to you. It's one of those weird idiosyncrasies you have. Oh, that and having connection issues. All right, are you there?
Oh, well, I hope that's fixed.
Yeah, I hope so. There was some nice, electronic beeping. It was very technical sounding.
Was it? No, that was me.
Oh, okay. Well, that's you going.
I'd like to tell you it's my new washing machine. That's the sound that it makes.
Okay. Let's. We'll give it a shot here. Sometimes
I bought it from the internet, so it makes internet noises. So
that's the way it works.
The thing about Mike Pence that is just so interesting to me is the actual mechanics of what you were talking about in this sense. You have to imagine, okay, there's this thing going on, and all of a sudden out of left field, Mike Pence is, sort of ready to do his ceremonial stuff, and he has a pretty clear idea of what he's going to say, and it's been written out for him by his staff. And there he is, in the House, and all of a sudden one of Ron Johnson's staffers shows up. How does Mike Pence know not to take the material from him? How did he know that?
I don't know whether
normally your reaction would be, okay, fine, you reach out, you look at it and say this is garbage and throw it out.
Yeah,
How do you know not to even accept it?
I don't know that it got that far, because as my recollection of the story is that one of the Pence staffer a Johnson staffer calls a Pence staffer and says, I want to arrange to hand him something important. And the Pence staffer says, what is it? And he says, it's the electoral slates from Wisconsin and maybe other places. And Pence's guy says, do not give that to him. And I don't think he ever gets physically close to Pence to give him the papers, because his staff protects him from it. But if no one had called, I don't know why they called and said, hello, are you free for a crime today?
Yeah.
No, I'm not. Yeah.
That's the thing. I'm trying to figure out the exact
I don't know why they did
mechanism
that
and time frame and all of that. Do you tell him? Do you not tell him? I've had people walk in on me asking me to do official things when I was doing something else, and your first reaction is, I'd like to help you out. What is it you want? Rather than instinctively, go away.
Yes, I guess they have to do that.
It shouldn't have anything to do with me.
If the guy you're trying to get to is the vice president on the day that he's supposed to be doing a ceremonial thing in Congress, I guess you try to make sure you're going to run into him, but then you know where he's going to be. Why not go up to him at the desk?
Because these
hey,
are
Mike,
presumably people who know each other. It's not like a complete stranger comes up. Then you could say, okay, just get rid of him.
Maybe Ron Johnson didn't know
Ron
what he was
Johnson. We're
doing.
friends with Ron Johnson. I know this guy. He used to be my staff. That kind of thing. And how do you have the wherewithal to just know to reject it?
I guess
anyway,
it could have happened from okay, hand these to the vice president. Which one is he? Okay, well, he's the white-haired guy. Well, they're all white-haired. Yeah, right. So the problem might have been Ron Johnson. Okay, here's a picture. This is what he looks like. I'm going to call him, and I'm going to make sure that he's ready to meet you because you don't know who he is.
And speaking of Mike Pence, because again, I mentioned yesterday on the show, he's going to be one of the two most interesting witnesses, the other being Mark Meadows.
Boy,
Mike Pence was asked about the indictment, and I read on the show yesterday his response that anybody who does this should not be qualified to be president.
Mm-hmm.
But today, this is in Mediaite, and Pence was asked about his alleged co-conspirators. And more on number 6, by the way.
Oh, okay.
So Mike Pence said, and I quote, I'm a student of American history, and the first time I heard in early December somebody suggested as vice president, I might be able to decide which votes to reject and which to accept. I knew it was false. Our founders had just won a war against the king, and the last thing they would have done was vest unilateral authority in any one person to decide who'd be the next president. I dismissed it out of hand. Right. Actually, Greg Jacob is legal advisor did. But sadly, the president was surrounded by a group of crackpot lawyers that kept telling him what itching ears wanted to hear. Wow. And the interesting thing is, as Pence, remains mired in the 1% range in the polls, okay, that's not fair. Maybe he is 3% on some of them, but not
with
quite.
The flies, he's 3%.
And, as he is mired there, he is inching slowly but surely, slowly I turn, Niagara Falls, step by step, to saying, okay, maybe what Trump did wasn't good.
Well, all right.
Now, I still haven't seen somebody follow up his original comments some months ago about, but if Trump is a nominee, who would you vote for?
Yeah.
Because that's key. If he says Trump, then forget it.
Yeah.
Like he's just forget it. But if he is, sort of aiming toward inching toward explaining why he's going to be a witness in so many words, like, I have to do this because this guy is totally unqualified. That's interesting.
That would be interesting. I would take it. It would be a welcome change for him. And this is, we'll take it. This is good material. Right.
Meanwhile, the New York Times says co-conspirator number 6 is not Mike Roman.
Oh my God.
We think it's Boris Epstein.
Oh no, it can't possibly be because no one knows how to pronounce his name. You do.
So I've seen it, Epstein, and Epstein on the same show on cable.
Oh, really? Oh, okay.
But I'm going with the Bill Maher version for now.
Okay, and that is Epstein.
Epstein was on the show, and Bill Maher introduced him as Boris Epstein, and Boris Epstein didn't correct him. Oh, and so that's why I'm going with it.
Okay. Does he? Why not? Look, he didn't correct him. He had the opportunity.
What I'm waiting for, I haven't found a YouTube that says, "Hi, I'm Boris Epstein."
Yes, right.
Then we'd know.
You know me from such crimes as.
You know me from people saying that my name is Epstein. But
that extra, is there an H in there? Is that what it is? It makes us want to say Epstein.
Yeah, there's an extra H in there.
Yeah. Get rid of that.
Yeah,
okay.
It's Bhorin, and so it's really hard to pronounce.
Well, no crime is complete without a Boris.
Right, and Boris bad enough, right?
Yeah.
So these are from New York Times PitchBot today because I just couldn't not do this.
All right.
So first he writes, legal experts say that the latest Trump indictment looks to be strong and legally sound, but Twitter user MyPillow1488 isn't so sure.
Okay.
Which I thought was pretty funny. But then right after that, New York Times Opinion has tweeted by New York Times PitchBot. New York Times Opinion writes, David Brooks column, highly educated anti-Trumpers typically see themselves as the good guys, a force of progress and enlightenment, but what if we are really the bad guys? Well, and New York Times PitchBot retweeted that with the comment, I can't top this.
Yeah, I don't know what you do with that one. That's the real thing. So, well, I guess I'm pleased to see David Brooks considering that he might be a bad guy.
Right. Now,
not for this reason.
What he's not really telling you, because this is what Brooks does, is he makes it sound like this applies to everybody. It actually applies to elite Republicans, where he's talking about the fact that the populist movement has just rejected them. The reason Trump remains popular, the reason Trump is viable, is non-college educated whites have rejected the elite vision of how things work. And he ties it back, which he's not wrong, to Vietnam, where the college kids got the ferments and the non-college kids had to go get killed.
Yes.
And ever since then, there's been a distrust, mistrust, uneven look at what it means to be highly educated and why are you elites running the country. And then we had Bill Clinton come in and everything goes global and we lost our jobs because now everything's being made in China. Exaggerations, but this is the theme that the populists sell. And, there's something to it. There's absolutely something to it.
Yeah,
the fact that people are trying to make things better for those who clearly have been left behind is completely left out of Brooks and the populist point of view. It's like, they're all bad.
Yes, and also just sort of like, this isn't going to make them feel any better, but like, as it turns out, people who put the time in getting educated, usually the education is all about finding ways to make it better for yourself and hopefully for other people too, but certainly for yourself. And those left out of the education loop are historically disadvantaged. That's kind of been there.
It's just gotten a whole lot worse.
However many thousands of years.
And so those who are left behind are blaming those who say, well, I'm in it for me and screw you.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, that's the age cohort that we were talking about the other day that's strangely pro-Trump, too. People who learned that was the way that things really ought to be, who went through school and were taught, no, corporations are supposed to maximize profit and to hell with all of us.
Right.
And thought that was cool.
Here's a mention. I think this is from the article, this paragraph. The meritocracy isn't only a system of exclusion, it's an ethos. During his presidency, Barack Obama used the word smart in the context of his policies over 900 times. The implication was that anybody who disagreed with his policies and didn't go to Harvard Law must be stupid.
Okay.
Well, that's not good, and you do have to be careful.
I guess so, although, yeah.
Look, Mitch McConnell used to say, I like Joe Biden so much better than I liked Obama, because when Biden comes in, it's like, okay, what do we need? And we work together. And Obama comes in and he lectures you about how you're wrong.
Yeah.
Well, and I hate that. That's what he said. He's right.
Yeah, well, he's entitled to say it anyway.
I think Obama was a terrific president, don't get me wrong, especially in the context of his times.
Yes.
The ethos changes over time. Same-sex marriage is way more accepted now than it was when Obama was first elected, and he was resistant and reluctant to embrace it, for example. But McConnell's right. And Brooks is right when it comes to persuasion and trying to present yourself to people. You can't, be the, exclusionary upper class, version of everything. It comes in context with simple things. You want to go to Maine, you want to go on vacation, you want to go up to Acadia National Park, and somebody asks you, or you ask somebody for a recommendation for a place to stay, and they give you this super luxury hotel that you couldn't possibly afford one night, with your year's salary. If that's the way you talk to people, that's not going to work. Not if you're running for office anyway. There's a way to be exclusionary and say, well, I'm not really telling you that I'm upper class and in a better class than you, but I'm telling you I'm upper class and in a better class than you.
Well, interesting. I guess if you put that side by side with, the reason we are so racist is those people never educate themselves. They should pull themselves up by their bootstraps and make themselves better. And
the flip side of the coin is complete and total racism.
Yeah,
that you can't have a fair trial in D.C. because why?
Well,
the jury
how
pool.
Educated they are.
Well, what is it about the jury pool?
More PhDs per capita than anywhere else in the world.
Yeah, well, that's not what you mean, really.
Oh.
You mean that it's a black jury pool, and so obviously you can't get a fair shake.
Right.
There's no question that that's a big part of
PhDs.
it. And a lot of this stuff happened under Obama because he was black, and that reaction has been incredible. And don't forget, Trump became prominent because he challenged whether Barack Obama was born here.
Yes.
The original birther sin,
Right.
and which was not a disqualifier for Trump, which still amazes me, but doesn't amaze me. I know that there are people that say, yeah. Well, he's just saying the quiet part out loud. What amazes me is how many people in the country are like that.
Yeah, they're not that quiet.
Yeah, now they're not because he won, and so he gave them permission to go ahead and say it out loud.
Right.
But there were many, many more people who were willing to do that than expected. So this all comes back to the arraignment today. That's the news, the indictment, and why this is so much more important than the others. Overthrowing democracy should, trump all of those other concerns. And whether it does or whether it doesn't over time remains to be seen. Here's a piece from ABC News, what to expect from Trump's arraignment. So he should be there in person. By the way, Georgia, which hasn't gone yet, still waiting their turn, said, if he's indicted here, he's getting a mugshot.
Oh, all right.
The sheriff already announced that.
Yeah, well, why not?
Here, I don't know what happens. I don't know if, he gets special treatment. He's allowed to zoom in. I don't know what the judge is going to do. He's a pretty, hard-ass judge, so I'm not sure that he's going to get away with stuff. Presumably he'd be treated like everybody else, and we shall see.
Okay, I guess. He's not going to be treated like an elite white guy?
Well, the barriers will be up. I don't know how close people will be able to get to the courthouse. They've been working on it.
Okay. Oh, all right. Well, I'll save it for later. Yes, go ahead, please.
Okay. This is Glenn Kirshner writing for MSNBC, why this Trump indictment is the most important. The alternative could have been a true national disaster.
Oh.
Like if you didn't do it.
Oh, okay. Yes.
And I think he has a point there. And, lots of people have written similar things about because the nature of it and the attack on democracy, why it's important, as it is historic. The government charges those who break our society's laws for one of several reasons: to vindicate the rights of the victim, to protect others in the community who would otherwise be subjected to the continued crimes of the offender, and to hold accountable those who choose to violate the laws. That's why the government charges people.
Okay.
Since John Adams yielded the presidency to Thomas Jefferson more than 200 years ago, the peaceful transfer of presidential power has been a hallmark of our constitutional form of government. It's a thing of beauty, if not an outright miracle, proving the viability of successful self-governments. Whether Trump's pressure campaign on Mike Pence, his faked elector scheme, or the January 6th attack, Donald Trump tried his nefarious best to derail that peaceful transfer of power. And, of course, that's why the trial had to happen and why it's so important. Ron Brownstein notes, however, in The Atlantic, Trump's threat to democracy is now systemic. Each time GOP leaders have had the opportunity to move away from Trump, the party sped past the off-ramp. And he's right about that. And that's the really depressing part. McConnell's been quiet. Of course, he's been not in full health.
Yeah.
And you're right when you were outlining those Republicans who are speaking up, who are on the bottom rung, including Pence, who may not make the next debate, Chris Christie, Asa Hutchinson, Will Hurd. They've all said stuff. They've been booed. But, Liz Cheney was booed too, and she plowed ahead, and we'll see what these guys do.
All right. It's a wait-and-see game for them, but I believe they'll all be booed.
Right. The long-awaited federal indictment, writes Ron Brownstein, of Donald Trump for his efforts to overturn the 2020 election may be necessary, but it's unlikely to be sufficient. The germ of election denialism that Trump injected into the American political system has spread so far throughout the Republican Party that it's virtually certain to survive whatever legal accountability the former president faces. And that's if you want to take the pessimistic, worst possible view.
Yeah, although
I'll give you an optimistic
prison term plus, poisoned minds among Republicans, but Trump's in jail. Okay.
Yeah, but I'll give you the positive view.
All right.
This is a different piece from Politico, which I really enjoyed reading. Remember, we've been following this. We talked about the fact that the Michigan GOP is broke.
Yeah.
The Pennsylvania GOP is broke.
That's good.
The Arizona GOP is broke. So this is a political piece. The headline is Everything's Fallen Off a Cliff. Battleground state GOPs nosedive in Trump era. State Republican parties across the country are struggling. Can they recover, and does it matter? The interesting part of the piece isn't challenging the idea that they are in terrible shape and falling apart, broke. Nobody likes them. Nobody wants to contribute to them, especially big donors who are the backbone of Republican politics.
Yeah.
The question on the table is the national people. And remember the Democratic Party pre-Howard Dean and his 50-state strategy?
A little bit.
The National Party Republican Party says, let him die.
No, all right.
Doesn't really matter.
Well, that's in
We'll
keeping with
just
their
run everything
philosophy.
our way. Who cares if the state parties wither?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the down ballot people won't be elected. So what? Not our problem.
Awesome.
We're interested in keeping power in Washington. That's essentially what this article says. And it's just fascinating.
I hope it's true.
We were there decades
Yeah.
ago. We got over it. We understood and, learned that state parties really matter. Scott Walker, what he did in Wisconsin, what's happening in Texas, Florida, how those states can be ruined
Yeah.
if you don't have a viable party opposing some of the weird stuff that the radicals in the GOP want to do.
Yes.
They're going to have to learn that lesson, relearn that lesson themselves the hard way, I think.
Yeah, although I kind of hope that they, clearly hope that they don't.
I hope they don't learn, but,
Right.
they're going to have to learn the hard way.
Okay, well, all learning is hard for them, so.
Among some state GOP officials, the mood is grim. One Michigan Republican operative who was granted anonymity because he wasn't authorized by the state party to comment said they're in just as bad a place as a political party can be. They're broke. Their chair can't even admit she lost. It's defunct.
Okay.
I love it.
Yeah, that's pretty good. All right.
Right. Not all Republicans are concerned. In fact, some argue modern politics in the age of super PACs make state parties relics of the past. Yeah, good luck with that.
It's a thought.
Janet Protasowicz was just
Yes.
sworn in
Right.
Wisconsin, and the day after she was sworn in, they're challenging the congressional, apportionment. They not only want to redo, they want the current House thrown out because they say it's
sure.
illegal. It was done illegally.
Okay. Well,
Just giving you an idea of state parties. Yeah, they matter.
okay. This one does. Hi, everybody. It's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and patreon.com, patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support.
Wharton.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Yes, and that's the correct name. Well, we were just musing at the end of the break there about the David Brooks bit about
Donald
hating
Trump,
elites.
the everyman who went to Wharton.
Right, who bought his
as
way
opposed
into
to
Wharton.
Joe Biden, who takes the Amtrak back and forth from
Yes,
home to
or
work.
even if you're still angry about Obama, like, all right, well, what we need to do is get rid of these stupid elites that are making me feel so inferior. I say let's start with the guy with literally golden toilets in his Fifth Avenue penthouse and a huge mansion that he turned into a club that you have to pay $200,000 to be his friend, and he flies around on private jets and pays no taxes and says that makes him smart, et cetera, et cetera. So, it doesn't make a great deal of sense, but then David Brooks wrote it, so you can understand. Can you have a point? Yes. Can there also be a massive counterpoint that renders your point more or less moot? Yeah. But you're only going to have space to write about one, so you'll write about the one where you have a point. So, okay. Anyway.
I'm blanking on the name of a hard right guy born in the upper Midwest who moved to Virginia and claimed to be a Southerner and was running for all sorts of stuff about a decade ago. But I'm reminded of it, the character at least, even if I can't remember his name, Corey something or other. The Atlantic piece by Ron Brownstein, all these actions measure how much of the GOP is now willing to accept Trump's repeated assaults on the basic structures of American democracy. While key state-level Republicans rejected Trump's direct demands to invalidate the results, most House Republicans voted to reject the election results, and most Republican state attorneys general filed a lawsuit to decertify the outcome in swing states won by Joe Biden. In the election's aftermath, the majority of Republican-controlled states, inspired by Trump's baseless claims of voter fraud, passed laws on a party-line basis, making it more difficult to vote or increasing partisan control over election administration. Son Willens, a Princeton historian who specializes in American politics, told me, Ron Brownstein, that U.S. history has no exact precedent for a party embracing a leader so openly hostile to the core pillars of democracy. The closest parallel to Trump's actions may be the strategies of the slaveholding South in the decades before the Civil War. These included violent attacks on abolitionists, suppression of anti-slavery publications, and the promulgation of extreme legal theories such as the denial of basic rights to black people in the Supreme Court's Dred Scott decision, all of which were designed to protect slavery against the emerging national majority dubious of it. That decades-long anti-democratic thrust from the South finally culminated in the greatest violation of the American Constitution in our history, which was secession. By contrast, the GOP's continued embrace of Trump and the evidence of his misconduct contrasts sharply with the party's refusal to defend Richard Nixon. So all of this suggests personal accountability for Trump is unlikely to erase the tolerance for anti-democratic actions that spread in the GOP. But many experts who study the health of democracy still believe that prosecuting him remains essential, just like Len Kirshner and so many other people. Richard Hasten say the same thing. You have to prosecute him. You really don't have a choice. You can't not prosecute him given what he did. So whatever the consequences, you have to do it because the consequences of not doing it is worse. But that won't make the problem go away even if he's convicted.
Well, that's true, but you still have to do it.
But you have to do it.
Yeah, there were a lot of other people that I felt the same way about, and then we didn't do it, and gee whiz, things got worse, and their party went completely crazy, and now we're in a position where everybody acknowledges you have to do this, even if it won't fix the problem.
Right. So let me give you an example of a plain-speaking good response to some of the BS that the Republicans are pushing right now. Tim Scott.
Yeah.
Who sees himself rising in the polls, which is to say he's still at 3%, but people say he like him. They like him.
Yeah.
His response, I remain concerned about the weaponization of Biden's the DOJ. Notice the keyword weaponization. They're picking up the talking points. And its immense power used against political opponents. Well, political opponents who commit crimes. If you're criming, you're going to be, indicted.
That's what the Department of Justice does. The whole justice thing.
Right. The Department of, dealing with people who crime.
Yeah.
What we see today are two different tracks of justice, one for political opponents and another for the son of the current president. So he got in, Tim Scott did, or his staff did, both weaponization and reference to Hunter Biden. It's like, the Jim Jordan show. And Michael Steele, the former chairman of the Republican Party back in a different era, responded and said, Tim, stop with this BS.
Hey.
You know damn well there aren't two different tracks of justice. Did you put classified documents in your bathroom? Did you try to overturn an election? If you did, you know where you'd be right now, and nobody would be spouting GOP talking points on your behalf.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, that's
the kind of response that people need to do from Republicans.
Yes. There's talking points that are available to you about two tiers of justice, but it's not about this one.
Michael Steele did to Tim Scott what Chris Christie did to Marco Rubio.
Yeah. All right. What did we do? Dispense with this or dispel with this notion or whatever it was?
Yeah.
All right.
See, he's using his talking points. He's a robot, said Chris Christie. He is.
Yep.
And then Rubio went on to just repeat the same talking point. And Christie said, there it is. Did you hear it?
Yep.
He's programmed.
It was pretty remarkable.
Yeah. It worked really well with Ron DeSantis.
Yeah.
Who is programmed.
Yes. And I might even say so.
And rebooting.
Right.
So I'd like to respond to that, but I'm currently rebooting.
Yeah. All right. Well, he should have one of those little
colored circles
loading
that spins around
indicators
on his forehead while he tries to determine what he's going to say.
Bzzz.
Loading. Buffering.
Dang. All right. Well, that's a good comeback, sort of. I mean, it wouldn't make much of a difference because Tim Scott is Tim Scott. And no one cares. But all right, it was well done.
Well, but they're the same talking points that all the other Republicans use, and they can be used on all the Republicans who use it.
Yes.
That's the point, really.
It's
the fact that Tim Scott happened to say it doesn't make any difference. It's all, generic in a box, guys.
Right.
It's all the same talking points. Here's a Playbook this morning actually had a very good analysis. The 5 pillars of Trump defense.
5 pillars. Are there pillars? Okay, let's see.
1, slow it down.
Oh,
While
okay.
Smith said he pushed for a speedy trial, Trump's lawyer, John Lauro, said, well, it's got to be a fair trial, so it's going to take 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
What we want is a just trial, not simply a speedy trial. We're hoping the Justice Department will recognize that justice is more important than speed. So we want this trial to happen after he's elected so he could, pardon himself and end the discussion.
Okay. I mean,
Number
don't
2,
do that.
put 2024 politics front and center. Jack Smith has avoided any discussion of the presidential election, but John Lauro, the lawyer, wants U.S. District Court Judge Tanya Chutkan, who's going to oversee this, to take into consideration the fact that Trump's a candidate and likely GOP nominee. Why?
I'm not
What
sure
is it?
why.
Where is it in the Constitution that says that if you're running for president, you get special treatment?
It's right over here.
Yeah,
This
I got you. I got it right here.
Article 9.
Right.
Yeah,
Number
okay.
3, accuse Smith of criminalizing speech. Right. This is all about the First Amendment. He's allowed to lie.
Mm-hmm.
He is. Jack Smith
I mean,
actually said in the
yeah,
indictment
well, you
he's
can,
allowed to
that-
lie. That's not the point. You can't act on it.
Yeah. That's a
Number
problem.
4, question Trump's intent. We talked about this extensively yesterday. Under the obstruction statute used to indict Trump, Smith must prove corrupt intent that the former president knew the election was conducted fairly, so he executed a criminal conspiracy to overturn the results. Lauro says, we will argue to the jury and
I'm
we'll
not even sure
win,
that's
is that
necessary.
Trump was arguing for the truth to come out in an election cycle rather than the truth be denied. Even at the end, when he asked Mike Pence to pause the voting, he asked that it be sent back to the states so that they could exercise their truth-seeking function. The funny thing was Bill Barr on CNN last night saying, essentially, yeah, Trump knew.
Yeah. Well, he did. And
Those who
of
were there
course-
know he knew.
Yeah.
And that's
well, he kept saying
Jack Smith's going to prove it. He says he's going to prove it.
Okay.
So, it's up to him to prove. I get that. But, he wouldn't put it in the indictment if he didn't think he could prove it.
Even so, yeah. I mean, it's even the idea of sending things back to the states. That wasn't the end of the scheme either. That was an intermediate play once the first 2 attempts at undoing things failed and was the last backstop before, well, how about if we just do it anyway and arrest everybody who says we can't?
Related, heart of the Trump January 6th indictment, what's in Trump's head from the Washington Post. Marcy Wheeler picked that apart and the corresponding piece in the New York Times and basically said, it's nice, but actually it's what he did.
Okay.
And there's no getting around that. What he did is the heart of the case. What he thought is of interest and it matters. But what he did is the heart of the case. Don't ever lose sight of that.
Okay.
A corollary to this is what Laura has described as the advice of counsel defense, with Trump trying to prove there was no corrupt intent because he was simply relying on legal advice from Eastman and Smith has clearly anticipated this as 5 of the 6, now 6 of the 6 co-conspirators described in the indictment are lawyers.
Yes. That's true. Even if he didn't describe them that way in the 6th case.
Well, yeah, he was acting as a political consultant, but he has a law degree.
Yeah. So I found that interesting. I thought that he was working the other way, but he fooled me with that one. decided to leave out the description of Epstein as a attorney, which is odd.
Number 5, the fifth pillar, attack DC.
Sure, why not?
Here's how Trump put it on Truth Social last night. The latest fake case brought by Crooked Joe and deranged Jack Smith will hopefully be moved to an impartial venue such as the politically unbiased nearby state of West Virginia.
What's nearby about that?
Impossible to get a fair trial in Washington, which is over 95% anti-Trump, and for which I have called for a federal takeover in order to bring our capital back to greatness.
Yeah,
It's
I know.
now a
We saw you
high
try
crime
to take over
embarrassment
the
to our
Capitol.
nation and the world. This indictment is all about election interference.
Yeah. Even in his defense, he says, I'm still planning to take over the Capitol.
Right, pretty amazing.
That is
John Lauro
from-
made a slightly
yes.
more nuanced case. We're looking for a more diverse area that is a more balanced political jury pool.
Well, no.
You're looking for an area which is 70% white and not, 90% black. That's what you're saying, right?
Yes. But I can't tell you I can't help you. The Capitol is in Washington, D.C., and it's just sort of an ironclad constitutional rule.
Well, here's the thing. And, many reporters have brought this up. That's been tried. We had a whole bunch of Proud Boy and Oath Seekers stuff.
Yeah.
They all asked for a change of venue.
Sure.
None of them got it.
Right. Because it's
Been there, done that.
bedrock constitutional law. You're tried where your crime occurred. I mean, how about South Africa? Why don't we move the trial there?
Yeah, or Hungary.
Yeah, but South Africa,
Some place
1980.
that fairly looks at the law.
Right. Russia.
Or Scotland.
The moon.
I mean, Al Inspector used it. There must be something there.
Well,
we can
Scotland, he would lose. I'm okay moving it to
do. I
Scotland.
got a golf course there. They all love me.
Yeah, right. Oh my gosh. Well, we saw that. We saw
We'll
some
have
of the
the
more
trial at my
interesting
golf
protest
course.
signs there. They do not love
The
it.
jury will be my employees. It'll be
Yeah.
fair.
Right. Well, the trial should be at the Mar-a-Lago Club. Sure. Right along with the Republican National Convention should be at the White House.
Right.
Okay.
Anyway, so that's what's going on with that. And I think that's
wrong?
all interesting. I think it's all weak, but, weak, strong. It depends what the verdict is. Right? If Jack Smith prevails, all of these 5 pillars are incredibly weak. And
Yes, although they'll be the
if Trump
subject of
prevails, then
appeals.
one of them at least was really strong.
I guess so. Although there may be another pillar that emerges later on, or you could lose the case, and those will be the 5 pillars of the appeal. That's another thing. But weakness or not, it could drag on for some time. But that's the worst one.
Yeah.
But that's the one why it's their last resort, I guess.
So here's another angle. A Trump ally tells NBC News that politically they think 3 indictments is better than 1.
Oh, yeah.
Here's the quote, an unsourced, unnamed quote. Politically, it's way better for Trump to have 3 or 4 indictments instead of 1. When it's 1, all the focus is on the details, but when there are multiple, the specific details get lost.
No,
it makes
they
it way
don't.
easier to make the case it's a witch hunt, which is really stupid because this one is so clear. Everybody understands what this one is. Nobody's going to lose the details here. And George Conway, who, by the way, is named on Twitter, has changed his name to XEOGREXONWAY. George Conway, Texas, says, when I play Russian roulette, I prefer to have all the chambers loaded.
Yes, right. Absolutely.
Makes total sense, right?
Yeah. I don't know what motivated them to even try to do that one, but okay, sure, fine. And of course, spacing out the indictments so that everybody gets a full week of every newspaper in America writing an analysis of exactly what's in it and why it's so damning is great. I mean, it's also good news for John McCain.
Yep. Former congressional staffer and pod host Matt Robeson, I don't know if you know him. He and Cliff Schechter have a Blue Amp channel that I sometimes highlight on the Pundit Roundup.
Okay.
Writes a piece in Newsweek called, "No, these indictments don't strengthen Trump. That's just media nonsense." Gets right to the heart of the matter.
Sure.
So if previous indictments didn't help Trump, these probably won't either. What was interesting, I was looking at Trump's fundraising.
Yeah.
And there was a big spike after the New York indictment.
Right. First one.
And there was a much, much, much smaller spike after the Mar-a-Lago one.
Yeah.
And we'll see what kind of spike we get here.
Much,
People
much,
are now
much,
beginning to understand
much
that everything they give is going to his defense and not going to reelect him.
Yeah.
He's taking the money.
I mean, that is his defense. He should be spending it on his on that election defense instead. That's his best hope.
Right.
Right.
Robeson makes the case that if you've seen Trump's lead go up, because all the pundits and talking heads say, "Oh, look at that! He got indicted and his lead went up."
Mm-hmm.
It's strictly, Matt Robeson argues, because DeSantis went down.
Oh.
All of the DeSantis people decided he was flawed and moved to Trump, and it's as simple as that.
Oh, well, that's an explanation.
It's got nothing to do with people rallying around Trump. They say they do, but really the fact of the matter is they looked at DeSantis and found him wanting.
Yeah, that could be it, and that could be certainly the real motivation. But once you end up at a Trump rally and they ask you why you're supporting Trump, is it because you're rallying to his side because of the indictments? Yeah.
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly not going to be,
rallying.
I've been wrong to this point, rally. and I, right. So, yeah, as you know, they don't admit that sort of fault, so you're not likely to get anybody to say, yeah, I had to change my mind because it turns out the guy I liked was a real idiot and a terrible campaigner, but I'm making a better choice this time.
Yeah, look, the guy I liked is rebooting and he's still buffering, so I can't vote for him. I got to wait. I hate waiting. So I'll just vote for the guy who's already online.
Right.
Garrett Graff has an interesting tweet in response to Lisa Murkowski, who says, as the process begins, I encourage everybody to read the indictment to understand the very serious allegations being made in this case, like everybody's going to read the indictment.
I mean, I'm going to. But
Garrett Graff did, and he said, as a Watergate historian, he wrote a tome about Watergate sitting on my table that I haven't gotten to yet because it's like 9,000 pages. As a Watergate historian, it's worth noting that nothing Nixon did, but I am going to get to it and I'm going to read every page.
Oh.
It's worth noting that nothing Nixon did, and he had plenty of crimes and conspiracies involving more than 60 people criminally charged, approached the scale and severity of Trump's assault on American democracy. So it's good to have Garrett put that in
worse
perspective.
than Watergate. Imagine how he's going to tome this one.
Yeah, exactly. It's going to be a 10-part
table.
A 10-part trilogy.
All right. Maybe. Okay. I'm looking forward to it when I'm 80.
Yeah. Yet a different angle. Interesting. I haven't seen this before, but I think this is right. Jennifer Rubin is writing in the Washington Post, and she says, why? Trump's latest indictment makes no labels even more outlandish.
No labels. Well, that's a fresh perspective. All right.
The preposterous no label scheme to run a third-party candidate has gotten even more outlandish. In the wake of the indictment, we can see more clearly than ever that the no labels gambit amounts to a do-over for the likes of Trump and unindicted co-conspirator John Eastman. As it's done so frequently, no labels gives itself away. In statements on Tuesday, the group's pollster postulated, that's Mark Penn, I guess, that a third-party candidate could get 37% of the vote, an assertion so outrageous as to make all but the most cynical in the group cringe. Wallace got 13 in 1968. Roosevelt got 27 in 1912. Ross Perot got 19 in 1992, but no electoral votes.
Yeah.
And so this is more proof that no labels can't win, but can only spoil in an election. But that's not the worst of it.
Oh.
First, the group promises to give voters a choice, but it's not the voters who will make a choice. No Labels intends to hold a convention next spring, but unlike the two major parties, there'll be no state caucuses or primaries. This is the proverbial smoke-filled room where wealthy donors and their consorts make the decision, not the people.
Yeah. If they nominate me, it's awesome, though.
Right. Second, and far worse, the group's plan is to throw the election to the House of Representatives by denying either major party a majority. That, in and of itself, makes selection of the no-label candidate impossible.
Yes.
So why are they doing it?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's a bad time to be doing it, but they are no doubt saying, well, you always tell us it's a bad time. It's so unfair. You're keeping us out of insider politics. We no labels people. Yeah, there's no end to it, and I don't know. They never like reading the room, I guess, but more confusion would be a terrible thing to add, or even potential confusion, a terrible thing to add to any presidential election to follow up the last one.
Right.
You really want it to be pretty
and
clear.
as a point of
who's the
personal
president.
privilege, I have to point out no labels is Joe Lieberman, so screw him.
Yeah, well, true. Also, why is he even? Is he involving himself in what they're doing? Is he being quiet? I don't see his name.
He's the co-chair. He
right.
co-runs the place.
Well, then that's just silly. What's wrong with that guy? All right, I don't know. I have no explanation for it.
You know, he was the worst. Arguably the worst candidate for vice president that the Democrats ever picked. He was at McCain's convention.
Yes,
I mean,
that's true too.
The guy's terrible.
Yeah. I don't know how else to say about that, but yeah, okay. But that's a good reminder because, they don't run around a lot saying that, it's Joe Lieberman's no labels. They instead label it as something else, which is kind of funny.
They label it as no labels.
Yeah. Interesting. All right. But a good reminder. He's terrible. And
we were going to call ourselves X, but it was already taken.
Yeah. But it had already been taken before it was taken. So, All right. Well, okay. That's a good question.
Right.
Although I really
want to see Elon Musk sue the estate of Malcolm X for copyright infringement.
Okay. Right. And also you have to pay royalties every time you type the letter.
Well, the Sesame Street people got that franchise, so you'll have to pay them, and that's okay. I don't mind paying them. Here's an interesting piece by Benji Sarlin that's in Semaphore. Donald Trump is ignoring
Really?
anti-abortion activists and winning anyway. This is quite relevant for Iowa, of course. The anti-abortion movement is at a risk of being seen as a paper tiger just a year after its greatest triumph, as Republican voters show little sign of being moved by high-stakes battles over the issue. We'll see it in Ohio, because the Ohio referendum to make it a law that you have to have 60% agreement to do stuff with referenda, that's going to fail. And then there'll be a referendum on abortion rights, which the abortion rights people will win. So one takeaway from Donald Trump's ongoing rise in the polls, which comes as several candidates have tried to get to his right on the issue, like Ron DeSantis, who signed a 6-week abortion ban that Trump indicated was too harsh. Now, 70% of Republican voters who strongly support a state 6-week ban back Trump, not DeSantis.
Yeah, because of all the sense that things make.
So he's not giving them what he wants. They don't care. They just want to win.
Right.
A higher percentage than Trump's total support among Republicans in the same poll. So if you look at those, the subgroup that thinks abortion is the major issue, they still go with Trump, even though he's not with them.
Right, because he taught them that things don't make sense. So
now, Trump has been hit at social conservative events despite his reluctance to embrace demands from major anti-abortion groups for a national ban, which of course is smart politics. Meanwhile, DeSantis is stuck in a fight with a major anti-abortion group for not backing a national 15-week ban, which Tim Scott and Mike Pence have. So Benji Sarlin says, what's going on here? Most Republicans identify as pro-life, but a May survey by our partners at Gallup found that only 21% of Republican voters who consider themselves pro-life say they only vote for candidates who share their view. That's notably far less than the 37% of pro-choice Democrats who say they only vote for like-minded candidates. That's the biggest gap between the two sides that Gallup has ever recorded. So abortion galvanizes Democrats. It does not galvanize Republicans. For those who thought the issue would go away, nah.
Okay.
Now, Trump himself has argued abortion is overrated as a vote driver, even as he continues to take credit for the fall of Roe v. Wade.
Yeah.
He blamed the abortion issue for contributing to 2022 election losses, saying activists supported policies that were too extreme.
All right.
So he's making this argument to Republicans in a Republican primary in an evangelical state like Iowa, and they're buying it.
Okay. Just, I don't know what it is.
So if that defangs the anti-abortion movement within the Republican Party, tells an ill wind that blows nobody any good. That's all I can say.
I guess so. I guess the real, well, maybe the next survey question is, did you actually hear what Donald Trump said?
I don't listen to him. He's entertaining.
Yeah,
I like him. He makes me laugh.
I just go to look and see how orange he is, and he usually says something woke. We got to get rid, and I cheer. And
see, that's what Jessica Rabbit said about Roger.
Oh,
Yeah, I don't get it. How do you two get? He makes me laugh.
I guess that's it. That's all there is to it.
That's all there is to it. People make it so complicated. And again, we've covered this on the show. A lot of conservative writers have said, you guys just don't understand. To the Republican primary voter, Trump is fun. They like fun. Okay. They enjoy it. They enjoy being with each other. They like it. They like excluding all of you other people. It's a country club for populists.
I guess, except, no populists get in.
You can't say that about Ron DeSantis.
No, nobody gets in. No one wants to go to his country club.
He's fading so badly, I'm not sure he's going to finish second.
That's good.
He's going to run out of money. He's going to have to drop out.
Everybody's running out of money. Where is all this money?
As somebody else said, comparing him to Scott Walker is really unfair to Scott Walker.
Scott Walker still has a ham sandwich to his name.
Yeah.
All right. Send me the Benji Sarlin thing. I don't see it here. You just hot off the press.
That was email-y stuff, and I will certainly send it.
All right. Well, anyway, I'd like to be able to point
it is online, but let's see if I can.
You just can't get to it because you're not populist enough.
It's called the courtroom election. I might have sent it, but if I didn't send it, I meant to send it, which is almost the same thing, said George Costanza.
All right. Oh, yes, here you are, semaphore. I can see it. Yeah, I was wondering about that because I think you started off by saying there's this great piece by Benji Sarlin and it's written in semaphore. Like, well, I didn't even know you could. Is that the flags? Like, how did you figure that out? It must have taken forever for him to transmit.
Because I was a Boy Scout, and I could read Morse.
All right. All codes come together and all right. I never did learn.
Right. There's a piece by Steve Clemens at the top, but then as you scroll down, you get to the Benji Sarlin part. Donald Trump is ignoring anti-abortion activists and winning anyway.
That's remarkable.
And just under that is the short guide to Donald Trump's unindicted co-conspirators. Everybody knows who the first 5 are. And now they list Boris Epstein as the co-conspirator number 6. Who is he? A lawyer and close political aide to Trump who describes himself as the former president's in-house counsel. Boris is a pair of heavy hands. He's not Louis Brandeis, Stephen Bannon once said of him.
That is true.
Yeah.
So who did we swap him for? Yeah, Mike Roman. That makes more sense.
Mike Roman. This makes more sense because Jack Smith is going with the national people.
Yeah.
The people who are around Trump all the time.
Mike Roman really wanted to be the guy, though, with that Eagles jersey tweet. But
that was a great tweet.
No dice. I was very ill-advised, but lots of fun.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's not you, pal.
Anyway, we'll see whether there's any other indictments from Georgia when I talk to you on Monday.
Okay. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I am once again torn as to what to do with the time today, but I think I actually was serious in that I'm actually contemplating going back to the indictment. Everybody should read it. I don't know how many of you have read it all the way through. It's one of those things that you realize you should do, but don't because there's too many articles offered by way of digesting the whole thing for you. But this isn't so long, like we could never really have sustainably read you the entire Mueller report, for instance. Not, for many reasons, not least of which is I would stop every 5 lines and waste the rest of the show telling you what the previous 5 lines mean to me personally, and then we would never get through it. But this indictment is not that long, but it is quite dramatic and remarkable. And I made a note to myself yesterday that we had gotten through paragraph 17, which was describing, where we left off, we were in the middle of the description of what the conspiracy amounted to with respect to Arizona and how they were going to get around to getting their fake electors handed over to Mike Pence. And we had just gotten through the Arizona House Speaker issuing a public statement about why he refused to go along and why he didn't want to help. And he made a very passionate plea saying, listen, I cannot and will not entertain a suggestion that we violate current law to change the outcome of a certified election. We swore an oath to the Constitution. We swore an oath to the Constitution of Arizona as well. And this was violative of both, and we just weren't going to do it. And, you don't hear that often enough. But we were almost at the end because paragraph of that section, because paragraph 19 is the last section of the Arizona recitation. But there is something important here in paragraph 18, and so I will continue on. So remember where we're picking up here. We're in the middle of understanding what happened in Arizona by way of fake electors. On the morning of January 4th, 2021, co-conspirator 2, and that is, just to refresh everyone's memory, John Eastman, called the Arizona House Speaker to urge him to use a majority of the legislature to decertify the state's legitimate electors. Arizona's validly ascertained electors had voted 3 weeks earlier and sent their votes to Congress, which was scheduled to count those votes in Biden's favor in just 2 days' time at the January 6th election or certification proceeding. When the Arizona House Speaker explained that state investigations had uncovered no evidence of substantial fraud in the state, Eastman, co-conspirator 2, conceded that, quote, he didn't know enough about the facts on the ground, okay, in Arizona, but nonetheless, he told the Arizona House Speaker to decertify and let the courts sort it out. The Arizona House Speaker refused, stating that he would not play with the oath he had taken to uphold the United States Constitution and Arizona law. And just to finish up the section, paragraph 19, on January 6th, the defendant, Trump, publicly repeated the knowingly false claim that 36,000 non-citizens had voted in Arizona, despite the fact that everybody, even Eastman, was conceding that that wasn't the case. But what you see in paragraph 18 is this interesting, subtle shift in the strategy from one, well, I guess in tactics, from one tactic to another, where they say, we just want you to hold hearings and raise questions. No, we're not going to do it. Well, I'll tell you what, why don't you just bluntly use the power of the Republican supermajority to decertify the state electoral votes? Well, we're not going to do that either, because we're not going to insert ourselves and overthrow the will of the voters of Arizona. To which Eastman throws out one last-ditch effort before he comes to his last-ditch effort, which we discover later on is violence. And I talked about that on Twitter after the show, because that's from paragraph 74, 90 something. It's further on down. So we don't get that here. But notice the subtle shift, right? He can't get them to hold hearings. All right, well, just use your muscle to decertify. Well, we're not going to do that because that's overthrowing an election and substituting our judgment for the judgment of Arizona voters, and we won't do it. Well, okay, how about this? How about just say you have questions and they're weird and undefined and you don't know whether or not you have the evidence or not. So what you're going to do is, because it's all going to be finalized in 2 days, you're going to make one last effort and say, let's throw it to the courts. Let those fair, neutral arbiters of justice decide whether or not there's evidence of fraud and whether or not there's something that they could do about it and whether or not those electors should be valid. If you won't make the decision, at least do this thing for us and throw the decision to the courts. And still he says, no, it's not going to happen. But notice that I was actually reminded a lot of, oh, not a lot, but a little of there's a very tiny parallel that you could make to filibuster reform efforts, which never made me very happy that this thing had happened. But you remember, if you've been with us for forever, since before the show was even on the air, like if you're with the filibuster reform discussions, at least as far back as 2009, 2010. You may remember that the initial discussion of not the nuclear option, but what Republicans had called the constitutional option, because they were afraid of calling it nuclear. But they had this other plan, and we adapted the plan too. I was, that's what happens. You come up with a plan and you say it's constitutionally and grounded in precedent of the Senate. Well, then that means it makes itself available to any party that wants to execute it. And if you remember all the way back, there was lots of discussion. It was very highly technical, and we even went through it on the air, a million years ago, that there was a theory that was actually, born in the 1950s and was attempted all the way through the 1970s in filibuster reform, that you remember this, you will probably remember it as this sort of magical time that happens on the first day of a new Congress, when the issue was getting past the claim that the Senate was a continuing body and that its rules continued unabated from one Congress to the next. But there was a theory promulgated, and it was actually endorsed by no less a criminal than Richard Nixon at some point when he was vice president of the United States back in the 50s. But anyway, the point was that there was this idea of this magical moment when the new Senate convenes. And the explanation for how do we reconcile the idea of a continuing body like the Senate having continuing rules from one Congress to the next without running afoul of the constitutional prerogative of each house to set its own rules of procedure like that. And how do we reconcile that with the fact that you're really saying that every new Congress has to live with the rules of the old and sometimes dead Congresses because they were made in the Senate and that's just the way it is? And the theory went, well, there's a moment right at the beginning of a brand new Congress, a new Senate comes in, and you could at that point say, well, we either will do something different, or if there's no action, no one asks to change the rules or to vote on the adoption of the rules, then, and you can sit and instead continue on right to starting to do regular Senate business, the things you would be expected to do at the beginning of a new Senate, or even in the middle of a Senate. If you just go ahead to regular business as usual, that's the moment at which, by deciding to do that, you acquiesce to the continuance of the rules. But if someone were to object and say, I would like us to actually directly consider whether or not we want the old rules to continue as our new rules, and use that moment to question the continuance of any particular rule. And it just so happens you would then be questioning the continuance of the filibuster rule. But if you did that, then Nixon's ruling was you would be working under general parliamentary law to settle the question of, do we now acquiesce to the continuance of the specific written rules of the Senate or make some changes? And under general parliamentary law, there would be no requirement for a supermajority to end debate. That was the construction at the time of the constitutional option. The reason I make this parallel, the reason this pops into my head, is that they did give that a try at one point, I think 2011. They gave that a shot, and they couldn't muster the numbers for it. But then and I think they maybe took a second shot at it in weaker form in 2013. But then remember, in the calendar year 2013 was when they actually did take care of getting rid of the filibuster for executive nominations and most judicial nominations, using what then later, people finally gave up on the constitutional option and started calling it the nuclear option, because the truth was that they realized, well, if you just use the mechanism of appealing the ruling of the chair and gathering a majority of the votes to throw out the ruling of the chair, that would presumably have upheld the 2/3 requirement for cloture on a rules change or something like that, right? And if you just went with the option of saying we're just going to use a bare majority to overturn the ruling of the chair and establish a new precedent of interpreting the written rules about the filibuster and get rid of it that way, and do it right in the middle of the session, because you may recall this happened in November of 2013, not at the beginning of a new Senate. But they just decided that, well, by sheer force of the will of a majority, we can do this any time. And there was this whole thing, we had spent how many years laying out this very carefully crafted process of using that golden moment at the beginning of a new Senate, only to find out that, brute force does the trick, and it does it any time of year. let's just do that. And it reminds me a lot of what's happening here with John Eastman. Like, well, we'll ask this all depends on state legislatures being woken up to the fact they had to be woke, you see. How ironic is that? Woken up to the fact that there was this fraud that we allege and that they should use this power, which is, highly questionable, to say the least, and in fact probably doesn't exist, to claw back the right to cancel out the results of the popular election and substitute their own judgment for who should be ascertained as legitimate electors for the state. And when that got rejected, they said, well, how about if you just cancel it outright and throw it to the courts? Someone will sue over your decision and let the courts settle it. Well, no, that's not going to work either. All right, well, then how about we just stage our own insurrection at the Capitol and physically stop them from counting the electoral votes, and then install ourselves in the presidency again and use the Insurrection Act to arrest anybody who objects to this stuff. Oh, well, that's an evolution of thought, to be sure. But basically what was happening there was, as various tactics failed, Eastman simply abandoned them. They were absolutely necessary. It was absolutely integral to his plan as written originally that state legislatures declare themselves. But then when they all refused to declare themselves, he said, you know what? It's actually not that important that they declare themselves. All they have to declare is that they see that there could be a potential issue. Well, they won't do that either. You know what? It's actually not important at all that we have state legislators involved. We could just sack the Capitol. So, that's why I bring that up. It becomes, I think this will hurt him a great deal in court as they bring out his own writings if they ever try him directly. I mean, this might help in Trump's trial, but it might be unnecessary. But it's an important point. As each of his must-haves falls away because no one will give it to him, he just says, you know what, we didn't need that in the first place anyway. And you don't need anything. If your final answer is, well, we'll just arrest and or kill anybody who stands in our way, well, then, you probably should have saved yourself the ink. What was the point in trying to noodle this through if it was just going to come down to violence? And, he just didn't want to admit it. He was hoping that something legalistic looking would work. But if it doesn't, we'll kill people. Thanks. Tell me how that's not treason again? Okay, fine. Anyway, like we said, this is the end of the Arizona section, and you just see this sort of stuff playing out in other states. Next up is Georgia. Let's just get right back to the reading, and maybe we'll stick with it for a while. Paragraph 20. New narrative here. On November 16th, 2020, on the defendant's behalf, his executive assistant sent co-conspirator 3, that's the crazy person, Sidney Powell. He sent co-conspirator 3 and others a document containing bullet points critical of a certain voting machine company, wink wink, writing, "See attached. Please include as is, or almost as is, in lawsuit," right? So, on the defendant's behalf, his executive assistant sent Sidney Powell this thing. Please include this as is or almost as is in the lawsuit. Co-conspirator 3 responded 9 minutes later, writing, in all capitals, "It must go in all suits in Georgia and Pennsylvania immediately with a fraud claim that requires the entire election to be set aside." And now back to regular lettering in those states, and machines impounded for nonpartisan professional inspection. On November 25th, co-conspirator 3, Powell, filed a lawsuit against the governor of Georgia, falsely alleging massive election fraud, quote unquote, accomplished through the voting machine company's election software and hardware. Before the lawsuit was even filed, Trump retweeted a post promoting it. Trump did this. I'm going to substitute him for the defendant. Trump did this despite the fact that when he had discussed co-conspirator 3's far-fetched public claims regarding the voting machine company in private with advisors, Trump had conceded that they were unsupported and that Powell sounded, quote, crazy. Co-conspirator 3's Georgia lawsuit was dismissed on December 7th. So didn't even survive a month. On December 3rd, Co-conspirator 1, Rudy, orchestrated a presentation to a judiciary subcommittee of the Georgia State Senate with the intention of misleading state senators into blocking the ascertainment of legitimate electors. Then it goes on to say what he did during the presentation. But again, here, we're back to stage 1 of Eastman's plan. Go convince the state legislatures to intervene. So that's what he tried to do. I will lie to them. I will mislead them into thinking that it's something that's so crazy you just have to put a stop to it, so outlandish that you might not understand it. Just do what we say and let the situation play out from there. So during his presentation, an agent of the defendant, that's Trump, and co-conspirator 1, that's Rudy, falsely claimed that more than 10,000 dead people voted in Georgia. That afternoon, a senior advisor for Trump told Trump's chief of staff through text messages, just an FYI, a campaign lawyer and his team verified that the 10K plus supposed dead people voting in Georgia is not accurate. It was alleged in Rudy's hearing today. The senior advisor clarified that he believed the actual number, of dead people who voted in Georgia was 12. That's different from 10,000 plus. Another agent of the defendant and co-conspirator 1, Rudy, played a misleading excerpt of a video recording of a ballot counting at State Farm Arena in Atlanta and insinuated that it showed election workers counting, quote, suitcases of illegal ballots. We all remember this. And co-conspirator 2, that's Eastman, encouraged the legislators in Georgia to decertify the state's legitimate electors based on false allegations of election fraud. Next paragraph. Also on December 3rd, Trump issued a tweet amplifying the knowingly false claims made in Rudy's presentation in Georgia. Wow! Blockbuster testimony taking place right now in Georgia. It's all lies, of course. Ballot stuffing by Dems when Republicans were forced to leave the large counting room. Plenty more coming, but this alone leads to an easy win of the state. It doesn't. He's a liar and an idiot. On December 4th, the Georgia Secretary of State's chief operating officer debunked the claims made at co-conspirator 1's presentations the previous day, issuing a tweet stating the 90-second video of election workers at State Farm Arena purporting to show fraud was watched in its entirety. That is, say, hours, it says parenthetically, by the Georgia Secretary of State's investigators. Shows normal ballot processing. Here is the fact check on it, and it's attached, I guess, to the tweet. On December 7th, he reiterated during a press conference that the claim that there had been misconduct at State Farm Arena was false. 24. On December 8th, the defendant called the Georgia Attorney General, this is Trump calling the Georgia Attorney General to pressure him to support an election lawsuit filed in the Supreme Court by another state's Attorney General. The Georgia Attorney General told the defendant that officials had investigated the various claims of election fraud in the state and were not seeing evidence to support them. Also on December 8th, a senior campaign advisor who spoke with Trump on a daily basis and had informed him on multiple occasions that various fraud claims were untrue, expressed frustration that many of Rudy and his legal team's claims could not be substantiated. As early as mid-November, for instance, this senior campaign advisor had informed Trump that his claims of a large number of dead voters in Georgia were untrue. With respect to the persistent false claim regarding State Farm Arena, on December 8th, the senior campaign advisor wrote in an email, "When our research and campaign legal team can't back up any of the claims made by our elite strike force legal team," hilariously enough, right? When you can't back that elite strike force legal team, you can see why we're 0 for 32 in our cases. I'd obviously hustle to help on all fronts, but it's tough to own any of this. Remember, Greg loved this part. It's tough to own any of this when it's all just conspiracy, S word, beamed down from the mothership. In other words, the senior campaign advisors at this point are saying, enough with this. We're sick of this baloney. We know that you've got a crazy person mouthing off, and there are several of them, but only one is labeled as sounding crazy, but they're all nuts and they should just stop. We can't go forward with this. We can't own it. We can't speak about it with certainty or pride. Paragraph 26, on December 10th, 4 days before Biden's validly ascertained electors were scheduled to cast votes and send them to Congress, Rudy appeared at a hearing before the Georgia House of Representatives Government Affairs Committee. Rudy played the State Farm Arena video again and falsely claimed that it showed, quote, voter fraud right in front of people's eyes and was the tip of the iceberg. Then he cited 2 election workers by name, baselessly accusing them of, quote, quite obviously, surreptitiously, I should do anything like that, passing around USB ports as if they are vials of heroin or cocaine, which is just a disgusting thing to say in whole. I mean, that's just, they're passing them like the vials of cocaine or heroin because, I can't say it out loud. But secondly, USB ports, Rudy, ports, that's USB drives, they go into USB ports. Nobody's passing around USB ports. And he keeps making that same mistake, which is just indicative of how dumb the whole thing is. Anyway, then suggested that they were criminals whose, quote, places of work, their homes, should have been searched for evidence of ballots, for evidence of USB ports, for evidence of voter fraud. Of course, because, we can't find the evidence. They must be hiding it in their house. Anyway, by the way, whose house ended up getting raided and searched? Rudy's. Properly so. Thereafter, the 2 election workers received, to no one's surprise, numerous death threats. Paragraph 27. On December 15th, the defendant, Trump, summoned the incoming acting Attorney General, the incoming acting Deputy Attorney General, see how many actings we have going on at once, and others to the Oval Office to discuss allegations of election fraud once again. During the meeting, the Justice Department officials specifically refuted Trump's claims about the State Farm Arena stuff, explaining to him again that the activity shown on the tape that Rudy had used was benign. On December 23rd, a day after the defendant's chief of staff personally observed the signature verification process at the Cobb County Civic Center and notified Trump, the defendant, that state elections officials were, quote, conducting themselves in an exemplary fashion and would find fraud if it existed, Trump tweeted that the Georgia officials administering the signature verification process were trying to hide evidence of election fraud and were, quote, terrible people. So, I don't know. The chief of staff told him the truth, and he tweeted out the opposite. This is indicative of state of mind and actions that he's taking to undo the truth. In a phone call on December 27th, Trump spoke with the acting Attorney General and acting Deputy Attorney General, because no one will actually serve in his administration. During the call, the defendant, Trump, again pressed the unfounded claims regarding State Farm Arena. Again. And the 2 top Justice Department officials again rebutted the allegations, telling him that the Justice Department had reviewed videotape and interviewed witnesses and had still not identified any suspicious conduct. On December 31st, Trump signed a verification affirming false election fraud allegations made on his behalf in a lawsuit filed in his name against the Georgia governor. In advance of the filing, Eastman, who was advising Trump on the lawsuit, acknowledged in an email that he and Trump had, since signing a previous verification, quote, been made aware that some of the allegations and evidence proffered by the experts has been inaccurate, unquote, and that signing a new affirmation, quote, with that knowledge and incorporation by reference would not be accurate. That's too bad, right? So what did he do? Trump and Eastman caused Trump's signed verification to be filed nonetheless. And that's how you get yourself disbarred. On January 2nd, 4 days before Congress's certification proceeding, the defendant, Trump, and others called the Georgia Secretary of State, During the call, of course, we all know what happened during the call, right? Everyone recalls.
We found a way in other states later. Excuse me.
Right, that's right. Trump farted. That's the most important part of the call. Just listen again, by the way, if you didn't catch it the first time. He just talks right through it and then excuses himself.
We found a way in other states later. Excuse me.
I love that. Okay, well, at any rate, though, he calls Brad Raffensperger. During the call, Trump lied to Raffensperger to induce him to alter Georgia's popular vote count and call into question the validity of Biden's electors' votes, which had been transmitted to Congress weeks before, including the following. Oops, I'm a little bit late on the music here, so we'll depart a little early. Here, Trump raised allegations regarding the State Farm arena video again and repeatedly disparaged one of the same election workers that Rudy had maligned on December 10th, using her name almost 20 times and falsely referring to her as a professional vote scammer and hustler. In response, Raffensperger refuted this. I've seen the video you're talking about. I think it's extremely unfortunate that Rudy did this. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Pause for some listener comments here, by the way. I just need to work some of these in. First of all, I just have to acknowledge the breaking news item from Mighty OCD. I don't really know why or how any of this is happening, but he actually sent me a funny looking link to it's a story of kids playing with over 200,000. It says happy faces playing with the new Evel Knievel stunt cycle toy, which is amazing because I just don't understand exactly what's going on here, because this is like a 1970s era toy. I'm pretty sure that I don't think I owned it, but my cousins had it, and it looks like the exact same thing. Did they reissue it? Is that what's going on? It just seems like a kind of a bizarre out of nowhere sort of thing, although Evel Knievel looks a lot wonkier in this version maybe than I remember it. But anyway, I don't know. Just acknowledging that the news came in. You can take a look at the link if you like and see if you remembered this toy if you're old enough. Also, Brian Monroe chiming in, not from he's from Canada, but he's chiming in from Mexico because that's where he's from now, which is amazing. Saying Mike Pence only showed backbone, as Greg had mentioned, because he knew his notes were part of the indictment. I guess there's just no way out of it now for him. So that's a good point too. Maybe that had something to do with it. I got to go back to the indictment itself, though. It's just that damn important. And I have more things to say and comment about it, and you can't stop me, is also the basic thing. So I thought it was important. Let's go back. We're in paragraph 31 now, where Brad Raffensperger, or rather, this happens also during the call between Trump and Brad Raffensperger, and I don't necessarily just mean the Trump fart. I love that. I'll never get enough of it. And it's unfortunate that he talks over it because I'd love to isolate that little squeaker that comes out in between. Anyway, this is actually important. It says here, by way of leading up, right, during the call, Trump lies to Raffensperger to induce him to alter the popular vote count. Just change it. Find me the votes. Find some way, some basis. And if you don't have a basis, just say the numbers were wrong, essentially, is what he really wants. But he speaks to him in the following manner. Trump raised allegations regarding the State Farm Arena, right? And names the election workers and then uses one of the names. I'm not sure which of the two. He repeats what did he say? Almost 20 times, referring to her as a professional vote scammer and hustler, which is about as low a thing as you can do, given that she actually was neither. But you're using the power of the presidency to pretend that she is anyway. And no wonder she got death threats. Now, in response, Raffensperger refutes it and says, you're talking here about the State Farm video. Now, this is interesting because it shows, once again, one, how impossible it is to deal with Trump, and two, how amazingly presumptuous he is about everything. He always thinks he's the best informed, smartest guy in any conversation. So you're talking about the State Farm video. And I think it's extremely unfortunate that Rudy or his people, they sliced and diced that video and took it out of context. When Raffensperger then offers a link to a video that would disprove Rudy's claims, Trump responded, I don't care about a link. I don't need it. I have a much, what does he call him? I guess Brad. You must talk to him that way. I don't care about any link. I don't need it. I have a much better link. Like he too, like they're passing around USB ports. No, you don't understand. I have a much better link. What do you mean? The content of the link is, I have much better information, a better video, a link to a better video. Now I have a much better link. It links a lot faster. It goes so very fast. Anyway, total nonsense. The guy on the ground with the information who's responsible for investigating all of this stuff, you're still telling him, no, you don't understand. I have a much better link. A much better link. Trump asked about rumors that paper ballots cast in the election were being destroyed, and Raffensperger's counsel explained to him that the claim had been investigated and was not true. Trump claimed that 5,000 dead people voted in Georgia. Can't get 10 through, we'll say 5. Causing the Georgia Secretary of State to respond, well, Mr. President, the challenge that you have is that the data you have is wrong. The actual number were 2, not even 12. There were 10 off when the campaign advisor told him it's not 10,000, it's 12. Oh, it's not 10,000? Okay, then when I call him, I'll say it's 5,000. Except it's not even 5,000. It's not 12. It's 2. 2 people that were dead that voted. And so your information's wrong. That was 2. Trump claimed that thousands of out-of-state voters had cast ballots. See, he too is doing the Eastman thing. Well, you can't do it because there was total fraud. Well, just look at the State Farm video. No, that doesn't really mean anything. The State Farm video claims are a lie. Well, there was 5,000 dead people. No, there were 2. Well, there was thousands and thousands of out-of-state voters that cast ballots in Georgia's election. Then, of course, they refute that as well, explaining, we've been going through each of those as well, and those numbers that we got that your counsel was just saying, and that would have been Cleta Mitchell, right? They're not accurate. Everyone we've been through are people that lived in Georgia, moved to a different state, but then moved back to Georgia legitimately. They moved back years ago. This was not like something just before the election. So that's wrong too. In response to multiple other of Trump's allegations, the Georgia Secretary of State's counsel told defendant Trump that the Georgia Bureau of Investigation was examining all such claims and finding no merit to them. Trump said in the end, right, so this is all, well, what about the out-of-state voters? No, that doesn't work either. Well, what about, these other various claims of fraud? Look, the Georgia Bureau of Investigation says nothing there. Well, then why don't you just find me the votes? That's the last-ditch effort. Just do it. Just say the totals are different. Find 11,780 votes. And Trump insinuated that Raffensperger and his counsel could, I'm sorry, he's not quite done. Just find me the votes. Well, we're not going to be able to, you can't just find votes. Oh, yeah? Well, listen to this, right? This is a part that I had almost forgotten. He insinuates that Raffensperger and his counsel could be subject to criminal prosecution if they failed to find election fraud as he demanded, stating, and are you going to find that they are, which is totally illegal. It's more illegal for you than it is for them because you know what they did and you're not reporting it. That's a criminal, that's a criminal offense. And you can't let that happen. That's a big risk to you and your lawyer. That's amazing. So he's threatening to bring down the power of the government and prosecute them for what? For not crediting the garbage that they were giving to them and investigating duly and finding no evidence of. If you don't prosecute it anyway, you're going to face criminal charges. Now we're on to paragraph 32. The next day, on January 3rd, the defendant falsely claimed that the Georgia Secretary of State had not addressed defendant's allegations. He refuted every single one in turn, publicly stating that the Georgia Secretary of State, quote, was unwilling or unable to answer questions such as the ballots under the table scam, ballot destruction, out-of-state voters, dead voters, and more. He has no clue. He shot you down in rapid succession. Everything you offered, he told you, was garbage, and exactly why. Well, he never said anything. He couldn't understand any of it. He's so dumb. On January 6th, Trump publicly repeated the knowingly false insinuation that more than 10,000, he's back to 10,300 now, dead people had voted in Georgia. And that's the Georgia narrative. Now, Michigan, beginning with paragraph 34. On November 5th, 2020, the defendant claimed that there had been a suspicious dump of votes, purportedly illegal ballots, stating, in Detroit, there were hours of unexplained delay in delivering many of the votes for counting. The final batch did not arrive until 4 a.m, and even though polls closed at 8 o'clock. So they brought it in, and batches came in, and nobody knew where they came from. On November 20th, 3 days before Michigan's governor signed a certificate of ascertainment, notifying the federal government that based on the popular vote, Biden's electors were to represent Michigan's voters, the defendant held a meeting in the Oval Office with the Speaker of the Michigan House of Representatives and the Majority Leader of the Michigan Senate. In the meeting, the defendant raised his false claim, among others, of an illegitimate vote dump in Detroit. In response, the Michigan Senate Majority Leader told the defendant that he had lost Michigan, not because of fraud, but because the defendant had underperformed with certain voter populations in the state. Upon leaving the meeting, the Michigan House Speaker and Michigan Senate Majority Leader issued a statement reiterating this, reading, the Senate and House Oversight Committees are actively engaged in a thorough review of Michigan's elections process, and we have faith in the committee process to provide greater transparency and accountability to our citizens. We have not yet been made aware of any information that would change the outcome of the election in Michigan, and as legislative leaders, we will follow the law and follow the normal process regarding Michigan's electors, just as we have said throughout this election. On December 1st, the defendant raised his Michigan vote dump claim with the Attorney General, who responded that what had occurred in Michigan had been the normal vote counting process and that there was no indication of fraud in Detroit. Despite this, the next day, the defendant made a knowingly false statement in Michigan at 6:31 in the morning, a vote dump of 149,772 votes came in unexpectedly. It was 4 a.m. at 6 a.m. Get your story straight. It doesn't matter. Anyway, we were winning by a lot. That batch was received in horror. Nobody knows anything about it. It's corrupt. Detroit is corrupt. I got a lot of friends in Detroit. They know it. But Detroit is totally corrupt. On December 4th, co-conspirator 1, Rudy, sent a text message to the Michigan House Speaker reiterating his unsupported claim of election fraud and attempting to get the Michigan House Speaker to assist in reversing the ascertainment of the legitimate Biden electors, stating, looks like Georgia may well hold some factual hearings and change the certification under Article 1, Section 1, Clause 2 of the Constitution. As Eastman explained, they don't just have the right to do it, but the obligation. Help me get this done in Michigan. Lie about the fraud in Michigan and also a lie about what was actually happening in Georgia. Georgia was refusing just like Michigan was refusing. Similarly, on December 7th, despite still having established no fraud in Michigan, Rudy sent a text intended for the Michigan Senate Majority Leader. So I need you to pass a joint resolution from the Michigan legislature that states that the election is in dispute There's an ongoing investigation by the legislature, and the electors sent by Governor Whitmer are not the official electors of the state of Michigan and do not fall within the safe harbor deadline of December 8th under Michigan law. I don't know why I think Rudy sounds quite all that sloshed all the time. But anyway, you get the point. I just need you to just muscle it through. Say it's under investigation. Say there's a question. There isn't a question. But just pass a resolution that says there is. That will be enough for our purposes. We need, remember, again, this is the change in tactics. We need the legislatures to intervene. Well, we're not going to do it. Well, we just need you to say that there might be reason to intervene. We just say it's under investigation. We're not going to do it. No. On December 14th, the day that electors in states across the country were required to vote and submit their votes to Congress, the Michigan House Speaker and Michigan Senate Majority Leader announced that contrary to defendants' requests, they would not decertify the legitimate election results or electors in Michigan. The Michigan Senate Majority Leader's public statement included, "We have not received evidence of fraud on a scale that would change the outcome of the election in Michigan." The Michigan House Speaker's public statement read, in part, "We've diligently examined these reports of fraud to the best of our ability. I fought hard for President Trump. Nobody wanted him to win more than me. I think he's done an incredible job," which is wrong, but okay. "But I love our republic, too. I can't fathom risking our norms, traditions, and institutions to pass a resolution retroactively changing the electors for Trump simply because some think there might have been enough widespread fraud to give him the win. That's unprecedented for good reason. And that's why there is not enough support in the House to cast a new slate of electors. I fear we'd lose our country forever. This truly would bring mutually assured destruction for every future election in regards to the Electoral College, and I can't stand for that. I won't." It's not only a reason for him not to comply with Trump's demands, it's the underlying reason why this indictment and trial will be so important. He states the stakes in the case. Alert, I forget who said it now about the stakes. Okay. Well, anyway, anyhow, I'll probably never think of it. It must have been, Jay Rosen, right? I think it was him who said, the reporter should be talking about the stakes, not the odds, right? Okay. I got myself distracted there, but he's stating the stakes of this case, the case against Trump. If we had done what he asked, we would lose our country forever. It would be mutually assured destruction for every future election in regards to the Electoral College. It can't be done. I won't do it. I can't stand for this. And this is something he tried to do 7 times over in several different states, lying the whole time. That's why there has to be this trial. Paragraph 41 sums it up for Michigan. On January 6, 2021, the defendant publicly repeated his knowingly false claims regarding an illicit dump of more than 100,000 ballots in Detroit. They just cannot stop his lies. Pennsylvania is next, beginning with paragraph 42. On November 11th, 2020, the defendant publicly maligned a Philadelphia city commissioner for stating on the news that there was no evidence of widespread fraud in Philadelphia. He told the truth, and Trump publicly maligns him. As a result, the Philadelphia city commissioner and his family received death threats. On November 25th, the day after Pennsylvania's governor signed a certificate of ascertainment and thus certified to the federal government that Biden's electors were the legitimate electors for the state, Rudy orchestrated an event at a hotel in Gettysburg attended by state legislators. Rudy falsely claimed that Pennsylvania had issued 1.8 million absentee ballots and received 2.5 million in return. Well, they got more ballots than there were voters, is basically his claim. In the days thereafter, a campaign staffer wrote internally, anyway, that Rudy's allegation was, quote, just wrong, and, quote, there's no way to defend it. The deputy campaign manager responded, "We've been saying this for a while. It's very frustrating." On December 4th, after 4 Republican leaders of the Pennsylvania legislature issued a public statement that the General Assembly lacked the authority to overturn the popular vote and appoint its own slate of electors, and that doing so would violate the state election code and constitution, the defendant retweeted a post labeling those legislators cowards. On December 31st and January 3rd, the defendant repeatedly raised with the acting Attorney General and acting Deputy Attorney General the allegation that in Pennsylvania there had been 205,000 more votes than voters. Each time, the Justice Department officials informed the defendant that this claim was false. On January 6th, the defendant publicly repeated his knowingly false claim that there had been 205,000 more votes than voters in Pennsylvania. And then Wisconsin comes up. On November 29th, 2020, a recount in Wisconsin that the defendant's campaign had petitioned and paid for did not change the election result and, in fact, increased the defendant's margin of defeat. On December 14th, the Wisconsin Supreme Court rejected an election challenge by the campaign. One justice wrote, "Nothing in this case casts any legitimate doubt that the people of Wisconsin lawfully chose Vice President Biden and Senator Harris to be the next leaders of our great country." On December 21st, as a result of the state Supreme Court's decision, the Wisconsin governor, who had signed a certificate of ascertainment on November 30th, identifying Biden's electors as the state's legitimate electors, signed a certificate of final determination in which he recognized that the state Supreme Court had resolved the controversy regarding the appointment of Biden's electors and confirmed that Biden had received the highest number of votes in the state and that his electors were the state's legitimate electors. In other words, here in Wisconsin, they actually did go to the next stage, one of the next stages that Eastman was advocating for. Let the courts sort it out. The courts did sort it out, and you lost overwhelmingly in spectacular fashion. But he's not done. That same day, in response to the court decision that had prompted the Wisconsin governor to sign the certificate of final determination, the defendant issued a tweet repeating his knowingly false claim of election fraud and demanding that the Wisconsin legislature overturn the election results that had led to the ascertainment of Biden's electors as the legitimate electors. Despite the fact that the courts had sorted it out, but it doesn't bother Eastman. On December 27th, the defendant raised with the acting Attorney General and acting Deputy Attorney General a specific fraud claim that there had been more votes than voters in Wisconsin. Sure, the acting Attorney General and Deputy Attorney General informed the defendant that the claim was false. Now, January 6th, the defendant publicly repeated knowingly false claims that there had been tens of thousands of unlawful votes in Wisconsin. And remember, these sections always end with this reiteration that, yes, he spent January 6th telling the crowd that then ultimately rioted at the Capitol that all of these things that he had been told numerous times were untrue, and that in some cases courts had investigated and found to be untrue, and in some cases state bureaus of investigation had investigated and found to be untrue, and it all had been reported back to him, and his own staff was telling him it's just not true. He went out in front of a mob that he also said to his security people, let them come armed. He came out and told them that it was all true anyway, and they should all march to the Capitol, setting on foot an insurrection against the United States of America, by my reckoning anyway. We're now on to a different section. The defendant's use of dishonesty, fraud, and deceit to organize fraudulent slates of electors and cause them to transmit false certificates to Congress. Extraordinarily important. I think I might wait until tomorrow to discuss it, and at this point jump out and read some additional commentary on the indictment. We're still stuck on the indictment, but I liked this this point, at least made in the headline. And I was reminded of it as we were reading the part about the Philadelphia City Commissioner getting death threats and the Georgia election workers getting death threats. But this has a slightly different focus, but you should hear this one. It's in Salon. It's Amanda Marcotte. I can't believe we find ourselves reading her piece again. Why Trump's January 6th indictment feels so different? This time there are victims. This is a good point. This time it's personal, the subheader says. As Jack Smith writes, Trump attacked our right to vote and to have one's vote counted. Yes, this is the general overall victimization of people whose votes he sought to invalidate in order to claim a victory. But we should also remember there are other victims in all of this. There are people who got death threats as a result of what he was doing. That shouldn't have anything to do with what a sitting president involves themselves in. That should be the furthest thing from their mind, but it is in fact his favorite pastime, to cause people individuals to fear for their lives, to tremble at the word of the President of the United States. Everything the Constitution was designed to prevent. Everything. You know, there's subverting our democracy and subverting our electoral systems, but he's subverting the general principle of freedom, liberty, pursuit of happiness, etc., the government not coming down and using its power through personality to crush individual citizens with whom someone in authority, namely in this case the president, the worst possible outcome, has a beef. Everything about the Constitution, everything about the revolution was designed to prevent this. This is like the ultimate reincarnation of George III here, or at least our popular imagination of George III, given our American mythos. So anyway, but this, though, is about how widespread the harm actually was. Not just the people who were individually threatened with death, but the millions of people whose votes were threatened with cancellation so that Trump could somehow engineer the numbers and claim a win. The weeks before November 3rd, 2020 and January 6th, 2021 often feel like a blur, or rather between those. Did I say before? And between. That was very much the design of Donald Trump and his co-conspirators. At the time, Sidney Powell, Trump lawyer and fellow coup plotter, told the press the strategy was to, quote, release the Kraken. Remember that one? The idea was that a frenzy of assaults on the election process would overwhelm the system so that it would break, allowing Trump to seize power illegally. But even in the melee of lawsuits, attempts to disrupt election certification, and sweaty Rudy Giuliani press conferences, one moment stands out in my memory, the day after the election when Giuliani and Eric Trump, tried to stop the ballot counting in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, where I live. That's Amanda, not me. Those two jackasses showed up at the convention center where mail-in ballots were being processed for a, quote, press conference. It looked very much like an effort to gin up a MAGA crowd to storm the building. Just didn't work because it was Philadelphia. Similar efforts had already been launched to varying degrees of success in Michigan and Arizona. And remember that this would all be modeled on the success they had in Palm Beach, Florida in 2000. And the same actors were involved in that as in this as well. In Philly, it failed miserably, in no small part because hundreds of city residents turned out to stop them. I watched folks march and dance after running off the would-be fascist stormtroopers, celebrating a successful defense of the ballots inside. After all, those were our ballots, the ones we had so carefully filled out and dropped off mere days before. Special Prosecutor Jack Smith packed a lot into the 45-page indictment filed against Trump late on Tuesday. He details 4 felony counts against Trump and much of the evidence supporting the prosecution's claims. The 4th count stands out for being spelled out briefly but profoundly, accusing Trump of trying, quote, to injure, oppress, threaten, and intimidate one or more persons, actually millions, out of the right to vote and to have one's vote counted. The law being invoked was signed by President Ulysses S. Grant in 1870 as part of a larger effort to crush the KKK. Amazing that he aligns himself with the KKK like his father, which was conducting a terror campaign against former slaves. It had been used innumerable times since, including by the Justice Department against people who try to use violence or force to attack the civil rights of others, which is ultimately what Eastman's plan was. In discussing Trump's attempted coup, the language in the media can get awfully abstract. There's a lot of talk about protecting democracy and our institutions from Trump, which can feel ennobling to the pundits, but often feels bloodless to ordinary people listening. So I was grateful to Smith for making a point of charging Trump under the anti-KKK law. Unlike most of the crimes Trump has been indicted for, this time the document mentions persons, the flesh and blood human beings Trump victimized. You, me, every single person who exercised their right to vote only to see Trump try to take that away from us. Yes, even Trump voters were victims. Plenty of them also filed ballots that would have been destroyed in Trump's scheme. During the coup, a Trump-supporting relative of mine took offense at a Facebook comment of mine, pointing out that Trump was trying to take away my personal right to vote. She denied that I was specifically being harmed, but had no answer but sputtering when I pointed out that my actual physical ballot was in that Philadelphia batch that Trump was demanding be thrown in the trash. I had carefully filled in the bubble next to Joseph R. Biden Jr., by the way. I had slid it into an envelope, signed and dated it. I had walked all the way to the Philadelphia High School for Creative and Performing Arts and handed it over to the nice young man putting ballots in the box. That vote belonged to me, and Trump was trying to destroy it. When Trump called Philly voters frauds, the people he was lying about were me and my neighbors. Well, there's more, of course, but I have long since run out of time to roll the outro music and get out of here. But you get the point. I think this is a very good point, though, you know, and it'll resonate with the most people. But honestly, like right now, I'm feeling more anger about the death threats than about the votes. But this is a much, you know, maybe even a more important point because there are more people involved in it. And yeah, that's true. It's very different, as she goes on to state, from the other cases. Even though, like, for instance, in E. Jean Carroll's case, obviously there's an actual victim involved there. But this is just a much more widespread and broad base of victims in numerous states and really everywhere, where Trump was just saying, oh, yeah, you're voting, but you're voting for the wrong people, and so therefore your votes don't count. Okay, we'll continue on Friday. There's more to get to, including the fact that I didn't, one other piece I didn't get to read, but I should just mention the fact that apparently the United States credit rating is being downgraded, at least by one ratings firm, and not because of the brinksmanship with respect to the honoring of America's federal debt, but rather January 6th. In other words, basically the best physical evidence there could be that crazy people could one day be in charge of the economy and might, in fact, whether it's default or just overthrow the federal government, in which we would have, in which case we should have no confidence in it whatsoever.
You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
All right, another day gone by, but time for you to catch up on the rest of the news with Justice Putnam on the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy coming up next. Beginning with the Michigan Attorney General thinks we're going to see a lot more indictments. I think we probably will. And on the rest of the menu, after the success against congressional MAGA extremists holding the debt ceiling hostage, Biden aides were shocked about just what I hinted at the end. So more information about this possible downgrade next. Hey, and no music either. Sounds great.